Hey guys, welcome to this episode of the TWNY podcast. Just a quick reminder that we are not professional medical personnel and TWNY is not a replacement for medical treatment. And as always, if you would like to be a guest on the podcast, head on over to our website at www.twny.life and reach out. I hope you enjoy the podcast, and remember, it's okay to not be okay.
You know, as you get older, you kind of learn a little bit about like your triggers, and then you learn a little bit about how to pull yourself out. And so I've noticed that if I'm in one of those moods, which I was in one of those moods last week.
Kara, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good. Yeah, this podcast has been a bit of a tale of rescheduling a little bit.
Definitely.
Man, we've been trying to do this for, I don't know, was it three months now? Is it
yeah.
3?
3 or 4, honestly. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Life has been crazy.
Yeah. Things happen, but we're here now.
So what's going on with you? What's new? What's new in the life of Kara?
You know, not much. I just working, being a mom.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out, the juggling just, the goals that you have throughout life and all that.
I totally get it. Yeah. And that whole, I might not know about the parent life yet, you know what I'm saying? So hopefully soon. But from what I hear, that really throws a good wrench, but a wrench nonetheless in kind of your plans.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think anyone, you hear people talk about it and it's like, being a parent's like the best thing, ever. And then you hear, I just feel like people don't really level with you from the standpoint of like, if you have, like certain goals and dreams, just trying to maneuver being a parent along with all of those. So it's definitely one of those things where it's like, wow, this is a blessing, but I feel like I was just in no way, shape or form prepared for any of it. So
yeah. Is it kind of like, is it kind of like a feeling of drowning a little bit? Because it's like, I imagine you have your own plans, you have your own schedule, if you have your calendar or whatever, but then it's like you have another human that you need to like have plans for and figure their schedule out because they're not going to do it by themselves.
Right. Yeah. And that's exactly, I'm a very scheduled person, and I've learned that that's how I operate best, is if I'm on like a strict, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to eat this. And then when you have a kid, there's just no such thing as like a schedule, really. Like I'll try to set a schedule, but it will be, okay, we'll work this day, but then the next day something comes up and he can't, he's off. And then it is very, and then as they get older, it's a whole personality. So he's figuring out life and he's figuring out like his personality. And then me being a human, that's something that they don't really talk to you about either, is it's like, growing up, your parents are people. And so it's like, as a kid, you're like, oh, you're my parent. And then when you become a parent, you're like, well, I still have my own issues that I'm trying to work through.
Exactly.
And on top of trying to raise you to handle, your stuff. So yeah, it's definitely very, he's 3, he just turned 3, and there's still things that I'm like thinking to myself, like, why have I not figured this out yet? Like there has to be a better way for me to manage this, but it's a process. And
it definitely gave me, realizing that, it definitely gave me a much deeper respect for my parents. Cause now knowing, I can assume, but now like knowing that, they were dealing with their own personal stuff, their own issues, their own hopes and dreams. And then on top of me being the little turd that I was, they had to deal with that, it's definitely good on parents for sure.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely, and then you hear a lot about, on like a deeper level, the things that happen when we're kids, or how our parents handle things is how we grew up to handle things. And so then you're like, well, maybe the way that my parents handled things wasn't always the most productive. And so you want to change that, but then at the same time, changing this habit that you grew up with is hard. So there's just, it's caused a much deeper love for my parents to recognize like, wow, you were going through so much that I didn't see as a kid. And it's awesome. I love being a mom. Yeah. It's just, there's a lot that no one prepares you for.
Yeah, there's no books on that. There is, but I feel like they really never actually truly even scratch the
Right.
surface on what you need to do.
Right.
So for the listeners, I know Kara, and even just for the, I know Kara to a degree. I knew Kara growing up a little bit in high school, middle school and high school. And, but after that, you kind of left, and you have your own story on how you got to where you are now. But for the listeners, who's Kara? Give us a little bit of what you do, who you are.
Um, yeah, I mean, presently, like you said, we grew up together, and I'm
Hmm.
certainly not the person I was in high school. I'm not the
Yep.
person I was, 6 months ago.
Hmm.
So right now, I'm just, I'm trying to figure out life still.
Yeah.
Even I'm 20 years old, and I feel like I'm trying to figure out, that purpose of, like, living, like, why am I here, and what
Hmm.
do I want to do? And like, in regards to, like, working and stuff like that, it's like everyone has a job, but you want to make sure that what you're doing with your life is something that fulfills you. And so
Yeah.
I think, like, right now I'm just on that, like, mission in my life to figure out,
Hmm.
like, okay, this is what I love to do, and I want to help people. I want to make a difference. And but really, I mean, in regards to who I am, I guess, like, I'm a mom, and I'm like a grower, I'm a learner, I'm
Hmm.
happy. I have, a story like every other person does, but I'm working to change that story.
Yeah.
You know, to change who I was, and the things that I grew up with, things that I experienced as a kid, and to, my
Yeah.
early things I still experience, but
Yeah.
trying to learn how to handle them better and just be the best version of me. So
Awesome.
yeah.
That is cool. You brought up trying to find your purpose a little bit, and I'll admit, I have, honestly, if I'm being honest with myself, I have been constantly going through that too, where I'm
Mhm.
constantly just like fighting with myself a little bit, and I've gotten better. I've made recent decisions in my life to truly kind of stop fighting myself and go with what I really enjoy and what I love doing.
Right.
But man, finding yourself can sometimes be a real source of mental health problems. It really can. And I don't know if you experienced similar things, but yeah, it was, constantly being down on myself and wondering if I even truly have a purpose, or if I'm
Right.
just kind of supposed to just be here in space.
Right. Right. And I definitely, there's that saying that it's like, what is it, like, when you finally really, like, lose yourself and get to that, like, almost like all-time low is when you start to find yourself.
Hmm.
And I definitely had that happen. The mental health stuff that comes with, the day-to-day life is one thing, but when you're actually, like, facing your mental health head on,
Hmm.
and you're like, you're almost like welcoming it with open arms, like, just knowing, like, okay, I have these things about myself, I don't necessarily like them, they're not, they don't help me be productive in my life. I've had, all the anxiety diagnosis, the depression, the bipolar,
Hmm.
and ADHD, all these diagnoses bounce around, that it's like, but those don't define who I am.
Yeah.
They are things that I have to combat every single day with my goals, like simple
Hmm.
tasks like going to work. For most people, that's like, oh, okay, I'm going to go to work and I'm going to focus and it's going to be fine. And I'm like, but I'm not going to go to work and focus. So I've learned that it's one thing when, when they come up, but it's another thing when you're almost like welcoming them, like, okay, I need to learn my patterns and I need to learn
Hmm.
this. And, you know, I have this feeling in my, like, just my whole soul, that I was made for a very big purpose, like a very large one. I was
Yeah.
really made to impact people's lives. And I
Hmm.
know that I just don't know how. And so that's
Yeah.
where I'm
Yeah.
kind of at with, like, everything you go through prepares you for what you're supposed to be doing. So how am I supposed to use what I've been through to go from there? So
Yeah.
definitely a lot that comes with that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You know, we talked last time we talked, we kind of, I took some notes and kind of on some of the stuff that you were kind of going through, like, well, not going through, I should say, but things you were trying, kind of going off of, um, you felt you were meant for a big purpose. And so
Mhm.
in a good way, you it seemed like you did a lot of things. You tried a lot of different routes to that. You talk about, um, you wanted to be a motivational speaker, and you kind of got into network what was it? Network marketing a little
Network
bit, right?
marketing. Yep.
What
Yep.
about that?
I'm still very convinced that that's a big part of what I'm supposed to be doing. I
Mm-hmm.
love to talk to people, and I think that people need to hear your stories. Even
Yeah.
if you're speaking to rooms with thousands of people, even if there's one person in that room that gets something from what you're saying, then that alone is worth it.
Oh yeah.
So I still think that that's just a big part of who I'm supposed to be. I think I'm supposed to share my story. I've learned, in my adult life, I've gotten to do a lot of things and meet a lot of people, um, do a lot of like personal development stuff, learn a lot of tools and stuff that like most people would just never, like never even think about.
Yeah.
And um, I've got to spend most of my adult life doing that stuff. And so
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm supposed to use those things that I'm learning to help people. I don't know, I don't really know how to start that or get there, but I'm still convinced that that's like what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be like an author
Yeah.
or something. I'm supposed to do something for people.
I think you're doing it now a little bit. You're sharing your story with us.
Yeah, I was
Um,
really excited for this for that exact reason.
yeah.
As a first step to just maybe even if there's one person who hears this who's can
Mm-hmm.
relate to any part of it, then
Yeah. Well, and I agree with you completely. That's why I do it. And I've had more than one person. I think we talked about this before. I kind of had the mentality, still do, that if this were to end, if TWNY were to go away tomorrow, I feel fulfilled because I know at least that I've helped one person.
right.
I've had people come up to me, people don't even know. Just today had someone that old Anthony on the podcast that I had before. He the mailman is what he does, his Instagram handle or whatever, but he messaged me today and told me, hey, I ran into someone today who's listened to our podcast and said listen to the whole thing all the way through, and it wasn't
Really?
anyone that I either even knew. So super cool.
That is cool.
Yeah.
That's
And
really cool.
I feel like this is going to do the same thing. I feel like you're going to reach people with this podcast. I think you have an awesome story to tell. You've definitely been through it. You've when we last talked and you kind of told me your story. I mean, you've been through some rough times.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, from like just on like just as early as I can remember. I mean, and you hear things. I don't know if you hear,
Mm-hmm.
I've heard stories about things that happened when before I was born, like when my mom was pregnant with me and stuff like that. And then
Mm-hmm.
I just grew up in like that dysfunctional household. And,
Yeah.
once again, our parents are people who come with their own baggage and their own things. And that just
Yeah.
kind of always, it got passed down onto me. And my, my dad, I love him, but he just didn't exactly do anything
Yeah.
beneficial for my mental health and my mental state from a very,
Mm-hmm.
very, very young. I mean, like my earliest memories
Yeah.
were just wrong conditioning about who I was and what I had to do to be of value and importance.
Mm-hmm.
And, hearing that stuff when you're growing up 3-4 years old, it sticks with you, and then it becomes very hard to undo as you
Mm-hmm.
get older. So that stuff just always kind of played out to my life in other ways, as I
Mm-hmm.
got older, the things that were said when I was a kid or that I was told that trickled into that low self-esteem. That low self-esteem can kill every area of your life forever if you let it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just a gradual, turn of, events.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, one thing I definitely wanted to make sure that I got to talk about while I was on here was, growing up, it wasn't great. I grew up in that, like that, typical abusive household type thing. But when I got to middle school, the later part of middle school and the beginning part of high school,
Mm-hmm.
it just got really bad when you add in all the other things that come with that time in your life, the relationships and all
Yeah.
that stuff. It got
Mm-hmm.
really unhealthy for me, and I ended up having to get sent off to treatment. And it was one of those things where I didn't think my parents would do it. I was like,
Yeah.
you're not really going to do that. Like you're no, it's just going to be whatever. And they did it. Like, they were like,
Mm-hmm.
no, like, bye. We don't, they saved my life in a
Yeah.
lot of ways by doing that. Not even just like, I had tried to kill myself in high school, and that's why they had sent me off. And so not only did they save my life literally there,
Mm-hmm.
but I met people and just learned skills through that, that still till this day, like, are people that I met when I was 15, that if something's going on, they understand, they get it, they can relate.
You met at the treatment place?
That I met at the treatment center, and
Okay.
they're still, I mean, I was 15 years old, I think
Yeah.
15, the first time that I got sent off, and I'm still friends with a lot of these people,
That is awesome.
and like good friends with some of them that I'll talk to. I'm one of them, I'm her son's godmom. And so, everything happens for a reason. And the people that, you're definitely not alone, but sometimes it takes that tough love that you don't realize you need to kind of just snap you right back into place.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, there's all kinds of stories there.
Something I just kind of thought of, we were at school together, and I think this says a lot about mental health in children, especially nowadays. But even back then, I don't know, and maybe you can bring this mic down a little bit. Maybe you can give me a better idea if anyone else kind of knew, but I had no idea. I mean, we have a small school. We had a small school, right? So I mean, we were getting the full brunt of everyone's emotions in our class every single day, or at least so we thought. I had no idea that you were going through any of this stuff. You always seem so happy and bubbly to me. And in any drama or sadness, I kind of always just, and as a kid, I kind of just chalked that up to, girls.
Right.
I mean, that was my ignorance as a kid. So kids don't really see that. They don't really like understand, or maybe now they do, but at least back then, it didn't seem like kids really understood emotions on that level to a degree that they could help. Right. And that's huge, because mental health problems in children is getting bigger.
Right.
And so it's kind of worrisome. It's
Mm-hmm.
worrisome that went so under our radar at school. At least it did for me. I don't know if it did for everyone else. But I'm sure there were so many people going through stuff, and we just, I know I went through stuff, and I just kind of bottled it up just like everybody else.
Right. And I think, nowadays, I think that they definitely bring more attention to that. You hear a lot about teaching kids like their emotions a lot more, which I feel like, I don't really, I remember when we were younger, and it was like, learning like the sad, the happy, and the stuff like that. There's so many other things that, honestly, and that may fall back a little bit on parents too, like, acknowledge, like, your kids need to trust you to tell you what they're feeling.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, you hear that saying all the time, that the happiest people, like some of the people who appear to be the happiest, are the ones who internally are struggling the most. I think that almost boils down to, like, for me at least, I just never, it's part of why I'm like, I have a very people pleasing personality still till this day. It's one of like my downfalls as a person, something I'm definitely working on. And it's because I just never want anyone to feel the way that I felt. So it's like when you're being happy and you're, by like, for me, it was always like, I could be dying on the inside, but I didn't want anyone else to feel like they had to be brought down by like how I was feeling. Or, I never want anybody to feel like they're not good enough, because they are.
Yeah.
And, you hear, with kids, I feel like it's a double-edged sword, because I feel like, with kids, there are the kids out there who they feel a lot of very like intense emotions, and it's hard to try to get them to relay that. But at the same time, I feel like, do we also have kids that maybe are just sad, and we're labeling them with something that they're not, like, are there kids who really are just like, oh, I'm having a bad day, or I'm going through a phase. I mean, I was misdiagnosed, so mental health and trying to get diagnosed with anything and get on any kind of medication to help you, and that's not helpful for everybody. But for me, that path has just been, it was like almost like a guinea pig for a while. Like, and no one
Yep.
tells you, you're trying this and you're trying this. And then if you find out that you got misdiagnosed, then they have to, take you off of one medication. And so that always
It takes a
worries me.
toll on you.
Yeah. And
Jumping off
it
those medications
worries me with, younger kids who can't express that because, they're not afraid to put little kids who can't, on different kinds of medications. And so sometimes it's, teaching the kids to express their emotions, but then also making sure that kids recognize that sometimes you can just be sad. And being sad doesn't mean that you have to have like depression or anything else that comes with it. And that it's okay if you're sad. What's that? It's okay to not be okay.
That's right.
You can't stay there. Like you got to talk to people. And people do make it better. Like that's the crazy thing about it. In any area, anytime that I'm feeling, any sort of just knowing that I'm not alone in that feeling. And not only that, but knowing that like it gets better. I think that that's the big thing for me now is no matter how low my life gets, I got a few years ago when I was right after I had my son, I postpartum depression, I was in the lowest of lows. Like, I don't think I'd ever been that low in my life. But every single day I thought back to when I was 15. And I just thought to myself, you know what, in that moment, I thought that was the lowest of lows. I didn't think I could see past that. And now I've experienced so many things in my life because I saw past that.
That's awesome.
And
That's
so
a really
every
good
single
mentality to
time,
have.
like when people feel sad, I just want people to remember, like, life is tough, but life is also the best thing you're ever going to do because there's so many people you meet. There's so many awesome things that happen. So anytime you get upset or you start to feel sad, just remembering like, I've been sad before. And like, it may be worse now, but nothing lasts forever. So trying to explain that to kids to where it's like, you can be sad, but you're not going to be sad forever. It's just very tricky depending on like how
it's tricky. And I think you're right where we shouldn't rely on schools to do that. I think it is important that those are conversations that should start at the home, because if they can trust their parents, if they can trust their siblings to share what they're going through, then, parents, siblings can let them know like, hey, you're not alone. This is something that even I go through to this day. And that might, and sometimes even in, I'll use the military as example. If you have a private who's just joined the military, young, just joined and is going through a lot of problems, whether that's credit card debt or new divorce or something like that, that he just is like, he's feeling really alone on top of all the stress that the military puts on you, just learning that his senior leaders, his first sergeant or something like that, just learning that they are going through the same thing. And the first sergeant can tell him like, hey, I'm going through what you're going through right now, or I've been through what you're going through right now. Sometimes that's enough to pull someone out instead of necessarily saying, hey, you're depressed, which very well could be the case. You very well could have high anxiety or real depression or real bipolar disorder. But sometimes all you have to do is talk about it to pull someone out.
Right. And I've noticed that for me, a big one is, I think we talked about this the last time. Sometimes if I can't, as you get older, you kind of learn a little bit about like your triggers, and then you learn a little bit about how to pull yourself out of them. And so I've noticed that if I'm in one of those moods, which I was in one of those moods last week and I couldn't pull myself out of it. And I noticed that talking to people at that time, it wasn't negatively impacting me, but it wasn't pulling me out of it. Music. So I noticed that music is also very, very powerful for me. So I have playlists, who, as crazy as it sounds, based off of what I'm feeling. And this is something that it took a little bit of time for me to learn. You got to pay attention to your emotions. You got to pay attention to that. You can't run from them. You do have to acknowledge them in order to like figure this stuff out. But I've learned different songs will pull me out of different moods. Like I've learned, like if I'm anxious and I listen to like Nirvana, as weird as that is, Nirvana will calm me down when I'm anxious.
That's
or
awesome.
just weird. It as weird as that is. There's a lot of different coping mechanisms and tools that people can use when they get into those places. Music is one, and then like activity. Like if I'm feeling any kind of way, I am not. I mean, I've always wanted to be that person that goes to the gym and works out, but I'm that person that goes to the gym for 2 days and then I'm like, all right, I'm good. Like, I'm cool.
Yep.
I always try to change because I feel better when I work out. But even if I, going for a walk outside, I think knowing that there's so many different ways, along with talking to people, to pull yourself out of your head. Tony Robbins always says, get in your head and you're dead. And he means that in regards to sales, because your mind will just allow you to keep going and going and going and going, because it's taught to be a defense system. As our brains are very similar to like wild animals, whereas like, they only feel that stress and anxiety and stuff like that in life or death situations. Whereas humans, we've somehow messed that up and transformed that into, okay, we feel stress and anxiety and all this stuff just sitting here right now in this present moment existing. And so our brains, like, they'll just keep going until you stop them. And that's the hardest thing to do. So just knowing that there's so many tools to stop your brain and pull it back is huge.
I will say to your exercising point, I am the same way, so my wife is a runner, right? She loves to run. It calms her down. And I know some people get those crazy endorphins when they run. I am not one of those people, even slightly. The thought of running, and even while I'm running, I hate it. I hate every minute of it. And when I'm done running, I'm sure I'm a little glad that, hey, I went out there and did some exercise, but it's not like I'm excited to run again.
Right. I see, and that's crazy too, because I've seen her. She ran that marathon. And I'm just like, look, I'm like, more power to you, because if I'm running, something is wrong.
We got two working cars. I don't know why she's doing that.
That's how I am. The school's down the street. I'm not running down there. No.
And then also to the point with Tony Robbins that you're talking about. I think I've seen some stuff of his, mainly YouTube clips that I've watched. But about your brain keeping you awake. Your brain can be your worst enemy if you let it. And I mean, it's happened to me where, I've got a lot going on. And doing the podcast and my own other goals that I want to do and things like that. And there will be times where I can't sleep. I physically cannot sleep. I will lay awake in bed, tossing and turning, angering my wife because I'm waking her up. And I just never sleep. I wake up and go downstairs and I stay up till the sun comes up. And that's all in my head. That's nothing else. It's not insomnia. I don't have insomnia. That's my head keeping me awake. Right. So it's a real thing. Yeah. And he's absolutely right about that.
Yeah, it's very real. And sometimes I I always sound crazy, but it's like, just telling yourself to stop. Like sometimes I'll literally get in those places where my brain will start going and, I'll just tell myself like, stop, just like physically, like yell at myself, like stop.
And like make yourself stop too. That's what I did. I had to finally, I was like, you know what? The next 2 days, I'm not even going to do anything with anything I've got going on because it's just driving me up a wall. So I'm just going to relax. And, you think if you don't let your, if you take a moment to relax, you think that everything's just going to go to hell. You know what I mean? But it doesn't. Generally, you take that time. Oh, goodness sakes. This will be a perfect time for me to jump in and do the BetterHelp sponsorship that I got to do anyway.
Hey guys, this podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Without a healthy mind and being truly at peace, it's hard. And the good news is that therapy works. But what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools or some help, or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships or at work or not dealing with the stress of everyday life. I get it. But whatever you need, it's time to stop being ashamed of the normal human struggles and start feeling better, because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist. So you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. And it's much more affordable than in-person therapy. And you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. Guys, that's huge. Join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself. And because you are your greatest asset. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. And TWNY listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/TWNY. That's betterhelp.com/TWNY. Let's get back to it, guys.
Some of the stuff you mentioned before when we talked about this was you're basing your identity on network marketing. And that hit home with me. But I want you to explain it first before I explain why that hit home with me. But if you could talk a little bit about how that happened to you and what was going on when that whole thing was happening.
Yeah, I mean, I got introduced to network marketing when I was 19 years old, and I love it. Like, I still, till this day, I love the industry. But I just based myself in that company. And then when it was no longer there, I lost that sense of identity. And it kind of, basing your identity and stuff is not good. I'll do it with my job sometimes. And then if I don't perform at my job, the same way, like, I have those bad feelings and thoughts towards myself. But you just feel lost and confused. And, it's just never really a good idea to base your identity in one. Because the second it's gone, you're drowning.
Oh yeah. And that's what happened. That's what's happened to me quite a bit. My family, or at least I should say a lot of members of my family were the no half measures type of people. When we're into something, whether it's, falling in love or a new hobby or, anything, I know several of us are we full bore 100% everything we have into it. And we make it our identity. Right. And then when something like that happens, where it's no longer there, or, the terrible breakup happens, or you realize that maybe this isn't what I thought it was, then it takes a huge toll. And that's happened to me several times where I've tried to create my identity and put myself into a box. And it's like trying to put, a square peg in a round hole. You know what I mean? Right. That's just, and I'm trying to force it because it's like, I want to be this type of person. And then it doesn't work. And then you're kind of left sad, Right. And that's happened to me before too.
Yeah, I think that, identity is a very tricky thing because you see it all the time. You look at people like Tom Brady. I think we talked about him last time and how, he did this for so long and then he retired, but he couldn't even stay retired for, like a year because he's like, his identity was just based in football. Or you hear people who, I had a lot of older women who would tell me, Kara, you're a mom, but being a mom is not your identity. You're more than just a mom. Yeah. Because they would go through that thing where they would give their whole lives to their kids. And then when their kids were no longer there, they had this huge sense of, I don't know who I am. What am I supposed to do? And so I think that, when you're trying to, and the cool thing is you really can create whoever you want to be, it takes time and it takes effort, but you can, but it's important to remember that it takes time. Yeah. You can't do it like overnight, and then to just like not base everything in one thing. You can be this and a this and a this and a this. And, for me, I work in like a sales-based environment now. And so it's like, if I'm not doing well, it takes a lot for me to be like, your worth isn't based off of the numbers that you're performing at on the screen. Like that doesn't, it's just really important to remember that you are not what you do all the time.
What I completely agree with you. And if it wasn't for Zoom being crazy, I would dive more into that. But I wanted to ask you, and if you're okay with talking about it, when you went to the treatment facility, you don't have to call it out by name or what it was or anything like that. I'm not asking that, but what was the was there ever an aha moment? I'm trying to figure out a way to ask this question, I guess. As far as, was there ever a moment that you were like, oh, like this is like, I can do this, or I've been looking at this the wrong way? And was it because of something they said or did, or in a workout they had you do, or something like that?
This is going to sound absolutely crazy. So I've seen therapists for pretty much my whole life. Okay.
Yeah.
And most of the time when you think of therapist, you think of someone who's very like, oh no, it's okay. Okay. Well, I didn't need that, because the reality is we can't control other people's actions. So my aha moment was probably one of the very first sessions that I had with my therapist in there. And I hated her at the time. Like I couldn't stand her, but it was the most helpful thing. I was crying on the couch about something that had happened. And she looked at me and she said, I know you're hurt. Like, I know you're angry. She said, but I don't care. I don't care about them. I care about you. And she said, in fact of the matter is, she's like, you can only live with the victim mindset for so long. She said, you can't control what they do. She's like, you're hurt and that's okay. She's like, but what are you going to do? Because all you can do is control your actions. Are you going to sit here and are you going to let this ruin the rest of your day? She's like, or are you going to change, are you going to do something about it? And it was the first time that I was ever introduced into that victim mentality of living in, and it's so hard to get, I still get sucked in there, but it changed my life, just kind of recognizing of like, you know what, like I don't have to do that. And not everything in my life needs to be bad. And, like, I don't need to have the worst of this or it's okay to be okay. Like it is okay to be happy and to like express gratitude and all, like, that's okay.
I like that.
That was life changing.
I mean, especially nowadays, you see it where it's, whether it's a actual issue that's going on, like just a collective issue with some people, that it is a little bit of like people almost feel like they need to feel like shit. You know what I mean? And I don't know what's causing that. I don't know. And it's sad, and it's not, it's something that's got to be fixed. I appreciate that you had a therapist that kind of took that route, like hard hitting route that was like, hey, there's one of two things you can do here. You can stay sad, or you can work on it, on yourself, on how you're feeling. So that's pretty cool.
Right. And it taught me that gratitude, you can't feel like that sadness and that anxiety and that hopelessness. You just can't feel that from a space of gratitude. So when you really get to those places, we all have something to be grateful for, whether it's, our vision or our family, our house, or, material things, non-material things. We all have something to be grateful for. So if you really are in a place where you focus on that gratitude, it's so much easier to stop that brain and pull yourself back to a good headspace than it is if you aren't in that. So
well, that's awesome. Well, hey, Kara, I just wanted to say thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
Absolutely incredible. And I can't wait for people to see this and hear this, because I really do feel like they're going to get something out of this. And I don't know if I'm going to ask you this. I know this is kind of an on-the-spot question here, but you mentioned your music. You're not the first person to come on the podcast and mention that music is helpful. So is this like a Spotify playlist that you got? Is this something that I can kind of link up with people and put maybe some songs that you like, or that your playlist on the podcast, like on the description or something, so people can maybe see that too?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, so I have it on Apple, but I can put it all on Spotify and share it with you.
Cool. Yeah.
There's lots of different genre of music though, just so everyone knows, like
no, absolutely.
Lots of different kinds.
It might be cool. Someone might see the playlist and it might help them out. So
yeah, definitely.
Again, thanks for coming on, Kara.
Thank you. I hope you have a great day.
You too. Hey, thanks for listening. If you haven't yet, check out our shop at www.twny.life. We have sweaters, shirts, hats, and much more. Stay strong out there, because this world needs you. And I'll see you next time.
Because of me, because of time, and what's in life, because of you, because of you.